Okay, so welcome everyone to this session, the last session before we start with the Collab Award and the closing of this session of this conference. So this session, in short, called Crowd Power, but the longer title will be Crowdfunding for Impact, leveraging the new resources to achieve the SDGs. It comes after a long project that we have been taking from EBPA, which I would like to introduce to all of you. But first, I am very pleased to have this panel, Koen, Oscar, and Francesca. Thank you, the three of you, for being here and for participating in our conference. For those that don't know them, Koen is the CEO and co-founder of Lend-A-Hand, which is an impact crowdfunding platform that is active in the emerging markets and that has raised more than 100 million euros invested in developing countries through Lend-A-Hand and also its sister platforms, Energize Africa and Plus Plus. Oscar Ugarte, who is the director of the management company Seed Capital Vizcaya since 2008. And Seed Capital Vizcaya is a public-private entity that manages an impact fund, a microfinance institution, and also an equity crowdfunding platform. And last but not least, we have here Francesca Passeri, who is the deputy director of Eurocrowd, and has been working for Eurocrowd since 2016, working for advocacy and strategic development, and also being very focused on how to integrate crowdfunding into the European structural and investment funds. So thank you, the three of you, for being here. I think it's a great combination of backgrounds and competencies for this panel. I am Arnold Picon. I am research associate at EBPA, and I have been working in the last year in a project that we started together with our partners Fund for Impact to explore the role of crowdfunding platforms within the impact ecosystem and to understand better how impact crowdfunding platforms are embedding impact considerations, but also how they are collaborating with other investing for impacts, such as impact funds and foundations. In this research that we launched last May, and that now I will be sharing with all of you, we defined impact crowdfunding platforms as an investor for impact that pools and manages resources from the crowd to enable social purpose organizations maximize their social impact. And we consider them both investment crowdfunding platforms, such as the ones that are represented here today, but also grant-based crowdfunding. The research also has a strong focus on collaboration, and it looks how crowdfunding platforms can partner with impact funds, foundations, other platforms as well, and also the public sector. And we look also at main opportunities and challenges that arise from these collaborations. And to know a little bit more case studies and some examples after sharing this report and publishing this research, we ran a series of webinars to know more examples on some impact crowdfunding platforms in Europe, such as Lita.co in France, and also Bolsa Social in Spain. And we also looked how they complement with other vehicles and how they collaborate with other types of investors. Today, after it's part of the conference, of course, but it's also after all this process that we've been taking together with Lend-A-Hand, Seed Capital Vizcaya, and other participants, and of course with the incredible support of Eurocrowd. Today we will be looking at how specifically crowdfunding can be seen by other investors for impact, and also by the public sector to leverage new resources to achieve the SDGs. And that's why, of course, this session is under the stream of mobilizing resources of this conference. We will also dig deeper in how crowdfunding platforms can collaborate with other actors, and we will have a long Q&A session. So we really encourage you to post any question on the chat. And also in the end, you will have the opportunity to ask for broadcast and post your questions directly to the speakers. So you can see in the left part of your screen, there is this small icon with a hand raised that you can ask for being broadcasted, and we can activate your camera, your microphone, and you can jump into the conversation and pose your questions directly. Before this Q&A, I would like to start with some questions to this panel. And I would like to start with some examples of practitioners on the topics I just mentioned. So starting with Oscar, as I mentioned, Seed Capital Vizcaya manages an impact fund, a microfinance institution, and also the crowdfunding platform. So Oscar, can you tell us a little bit how the three different vehicles are complementing each other and what is the specific role on crowdfunding, or the crowdfunding platform within Seed Capital Vizcaya?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Arnaud. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, as you mentioned, we are a venture capital company with private and public capital. We are a little bit different if you compare it with other risk capital management companies in other territories. 52% of the company is managed by the public institution, by the local region of Vizcaya, and the others are banks or other financial tools really involved with our territory in the Basque Country. We manage risk capital classic instruments, but as you mentioned, we handle those three instruments that make a lot of growth in our territory and for sure help us to make a bigger ecosystem. On one side, I will suggest that the microfinance instrument is one of the three tools. It helps a lot to get a vision of what's happening in the bottom of the pyramid in downstream. It helps a lot to know what's happening with the youngest entrepreneurs, and the instrument provides us a lot of information about how to approach to the smaller projects and to know exactly what's happening with them, especially with the social impact project and with the startups really close to our SDG objectives. So the information allows us to select the projects and also to elevate to the classical seed capital fund. Maybe some of them we used to elevate to our seed first fund, or maybe we could use it with our social impact fund, or also with the crowdfunding equity platform, because we manage a crowdfunding equity platform that is really focused in pre-seed area and technology and social impact projects. And that helps us a lot knowing what's going on with those small projects. The microfinance, the MFI, helps us a lot because all the projects that we have elevated to the crowdfunding platform, they were financed with MFI, so they received the micro loan, and they give us a lot of clues about what's going on in the first step in those small companies. I will say that for a regional public administration, having that information, it's very relevant. It also helps to say that it's really important to design aids and grants and other possible instruments to help them to go to the next level. Beyond that, as a synthesis, I would say that there are definitely complementary tools. They help us also to attract investors because it makes the investment with a lower risk. So it's really attractive for investors to come with us and to combine those possible tools with their possible interest.
Thank you very much, Oscar. I think understanding the complements, the complementarities between the different vehicles, it's key not only for organizations that manage all of them, but also for other organizations to partner with others and to understand with whom to collaborate. And talking about collaboration with other private investors, I think Koen lend a hand is a true pioneer in collaborating with other crowdfunding platforms and also other types of investors to set up 2 additional crowdfunding platforms that are focused in closing the SDG financing gap, which are Plus Plus and Energize Africa. Could you tell us what was the reason behind starting these partnerships and what was the driver that brought you to put yourself in this stage?
Yes, thanks Arnaud for inviting me to this panel. Yeah, so next to Lendhand, we indeed have sister platforms called Energize Africa in the UK and Plus Plus based in the Netherlands, but open for European investors. The reason for that is that we believe that it's very hard to have one platform for all kind of investors, for all kind of projects. Crowdfunding itself is already very difficult when you think about it. What we ask from potential crowd investors is to go to our website, and they may never have heard of us before, to invest in, I don't know, Ghana, where they've never been, in a very small company, right? So there's already a lot of messaging before that really happens, before someone really does that transaction. And you need to do that in the right way. And then you can imagine that a British crowd investor is different than a Dutch crowd investor. So when the opportunity arose for us to become active in the UK, we said, okay, so we can either try and do it ourselves, or we collaborate and we make use of local expertise, people on the ground, people who know how to approach retail investors in the UK. Rather than try and do it in our own Dutch way, which probably will fail. So we partnered up with Ethics, which is a UK-based crowdfunding platform, to set up Energize Africa, also together with the UK government. So UK Aid provided a subsidy for us to kickstart this. I think that was a really, truly pioneering move from the UK government to say, okay, what we want is British citizens to be more involved in trying to come up or to sustain solutions in Africa when it comes down to renewable energy. So yeah, that's how we approach it and collaborated with Ethics and the UK government. Then what we also noticed after speaking to NGOs was that certain what some foundations or NGOs see is that their base of donators are getting older and they're not being replaced by the younger generations who don't really get into the habit of donating some of their money. However, what they do think works for them is impact investing. And so we found a way of working together with Solidaridad and back then also ICO, which are two NGOs, to say, okay, so what is a good alternative for donations that really appeals to the younger generation? So we came up with the solution of having, for them to invest in very high risk projects in Africa in the agri space, so very small tickets. And rather than having those kind of companies pay a very large interest rate, we put the interest rate to zero. So we flip it around. It's really a mind shift in the thinking. Say, okay, so it's really high risk, and therefore you get 0%. And the idea, of course, is for people, in the best case, they get their money back and they can reinvest, get the money back, and sometimes they lose some. But in the end, they would be able to recycle quite a few of their euros rather than doing one-time donation. They actually may be able to spend €1 7 or 8 times before it's lost, helping 7 or 8 people or companies along the way. So yeah, that is something that we then typically are not able to show those kind of projects on the Lendhand platform, and we've decided to set up a separate platform for that called Plus Plus. And so our way of thinking is how can we leverage existing networks and expertise and then bring our own assets in there, which is technology, our license, our back office. But yeah, the way forward for we see is really in collaborating.
It's fascinating how you managed to find partners that had the missing pieces of knowledge that you didn't have in house to set up both Energize Africa and Plus Plus. Thanks for sharing this experience. And now that we have seen how crowdfunding can be complementary to other vehicles and can platforms can collaborate with other private investors, I would like to move a little bit to the second block of questions, which will be more about public-private collaboration. And here I think Francesca is quite knowledgeable, I will say. So Francesca, as you know, there was this recent FICompass report that was looking at the different types of roles that the public sector can have to strengthen crowdfunding. There was the role of manager, the role of sponsor, the role of curator, etc. And more recently, you edited a report in which you showcased lots of case studies throughout Europe in which the public sector is adopting these roles. So could you tell us a little bit more on the different roles that the public sector can take and how this supports crowdfunding?
Absolutely. Well, actually, thanks for inviting me and for having me onto this panel. It's very interesting to see that there's so much engagement with crowdfunding. I have to say it has increased so much since I started at ECN that it's heartwarming. In terms of how the public sector can engage with crowdfunding, we have indeed a number of different ways and of different roles. So the four that you have mentioned were actually mapped in 2018 through one of the reports that we have published and then have been, let's say, accepted by consensus in further publications, such as the one that you were quoting. And we have seen that basically there is this four main roles that public authorities can play, and they differ in terms of how much the public authority is engaging directly with the crowdfunding platform. So the relationship between the public authority and the crowdfunding platform, and in turn the project, is the element that gives way to these four categories. So I would start from the first one, which is the sponsor role. So in the sponsor role, we have a public authority that decides to launch its own crowdfunding campaign to finance a project for which maybe they have part of the resources but not the full amount, or where they need to validate the idea with the wider citizenship. So it can be either a way of raising the needed fund, so the last mile of funding, or it can also be a way to kind of validate and exchange with citizens. And this, of course, has a very kind of punctual commitment. The public authority becomes a project owner in itself. And then once the campaign is over, the interaction is finished. Then we have the manager role, where the public authority decides to set up their own crowdfunding platform. So they basically accept the idea of crowdfunding as a tool that they want to offer their stakeholders, maybe at different conditions than average crowdfunding platforms or private crowdfunding platforms would. So with facilitated fees or advisory and coaching services, and it's let's say a longer standing commitment. So the public authority launches a crowdfunding platform and enables every stakeholder or specific actors in definite areas to launch their crowdfunding campaigns and raise funds. And then we have the third role, which is the role of the curator, where the public authority partners with an existing crowdfunding platform in the sense that it looks at those projects that have specific activities in one policy area that is of specific interest to the public authority, and looks at those that are, according to a set of criteria, either more promising or more in need of extra funding, of follow-on investment. And according to that, it makes a short list, a selection, and then can decide to co-finance those projects after they have successfully finished their crowdfunding campaign. So it's, let's say, an ex post evaluation. And then we have the facilitator role, where the public authority actually commits budget to co-financing crowdfunding campaigns that happen within a specific policy area. And that would be the case, for example, of the structural funds, where public authorities select a specific policy or investment priority. and they decide to co-finance initiatives in that area. And in that case, for example, the most common scheme that we see is that the public authority pledges a certain amount of money that will be then awarded to all the projects that raise at least a definite amount out of their overall funding target through crowdfunding. And then this would be complemented by the public funds. So it will be a sort of a 50-50 or 40-60 scheme. And these are the 4 roles. And then we have actually mapped a 5th role in our latest report, 2021. Actually, we published in July or in June. That is the role of the enabler. And here we see that there is no direct engagement between the public authority and the crowdfunding platform, but that there is, let's say, a general and overarching willingness to provide support services, dissemination, communication efforts to all those stakeholders that will then run a crowdfunding campaign. So there is no direct partnership agreement, but there is still an overarching support towards the use of crowdfunding, be it on one or another platform that is up to the choice of the stakeholders.
Thank you, Francesca, for this overview. I think understanding these 5 roles now that the public sector can have is crucial, not only for the platforms themselves, but also for anyone that wants to partner with them. And I think we are also lucky to have one platform that is also mentioned as a case study in which the public sector engages, in this case as a manager. As Oscar, you mentioned, you are a public-private partnership that set up these different investment vehicles, including the crowdfunding platform. So can you let us know a little bit more what is the role of the public sector when it comes to setting up, but also to managing the platform itself? I'm sorry, I think you are muted. I will just unmute you.
Yeah. Our approach to the crowdfunded business, I think it is really different if you compare it with other normal platforms in our country and in Europe. I have to say that we decided to be manager of a crowdfunding platform because we have a long-term record in doing operations in seed capital area, because seed capital was built and was created in 1989. So we have a track record of more than 30 years doing this. That's the main reason that we decided to try to focus on being a manager, because it's a really risky and difficult business. So you have to have a lot of info about analyzing operations and being on the ground and facing difficulties. So it's relevant that we did this step because we have a lot of track record in doing operations. I would say that obviously we want to raise money for our projects, for the projects that we have on our platform. And for sure, we are also trying to cover the gaps that are in the system that probably they are the same as other regions in Europe and in other countries. But I have to say that we have some peculiarities, some other things that I could summarize in four ideas. We are quite different because we don't charge not our fee to our companies. We help them a lot in trying to structure in the company legal area, trying to fix the evaluation of the company, trying to do also a clever marketing strategy, and we do that with also other collaborators of the public system. So we are quite different at that point. We seek also to generate an investment culture in citizens. You mentioned before citizens, now and Francesca. We want to really focus on that. We want to make understand people that they can do a small investment operations and that they can also be part of an investment ecosystem. For the public regional government, this is a key point. This is really relevant. We want also to show entrepreneurial talent. that we manage in the Basque Country, in Biscay, at the level of technology and also at social projects. And we help a lot in this point to do a clever and efficient marketing, and we want also to have a notorious vision of those talents. And at last, I would say that recognition. We want to teach society that being an entrepreneur, it's a powerful option. We must recognize the work of this group, especially in our country, because in Spain, at least, being an entrepreneur is often not the first option, and we want to work a lot on that point. And for sure, we think that crowdfunding platform could help a lot facing these issues. I think it's a good tool, and it's a good tool also for administration to provide a lot of light in that difficult area of investment and culture of investment linked to citizens.
That's a great example, Oscar. Thanks for sharing this with us. As I also think that there might not be many examples as unique as Seed Capital Vizcaya in Europe. At least not that I know many. So I'd like to move to the last block of questions. And as we were talking at the beginning on the role of crowdfunding to close the SDG financing gap, I would like to go back to Koen and ask him, how is the focus of Lend a Hand actually in closing the funding gap between entrepreneurs in emerging markets that are seeking for funding and the available capital options that they find from traditional financial institutions. How does the crowd lending approach in that case help closing or tackling this mismatch of available finance?
It's actually my answer would be building on what Oscar just said. It's about involving citizens, right, and mobilizing everyday people in order to say that, okay, if we have big global problems, we cannot rely on some kind of a top-down approach from governments in order to solve that. We really need to do it ourselves. And you see people in their behavior, people want that, right? You see that people are eating less meat, they're driving more efficient vehicles, recycle. But did you know that the impact of how your money is invested? I just heard research about this. The way your money is invested through your pensions and insurance company, your savings and everything else has 20 times more impact than how you behave. So it's an enormous impact. But that means you have to give people the tools in order to put their money to good use. And of course, there are very good funds out there and governments are helping. But at the same time, you also see that governmental bodies and organizations and institutional investors are also working under a lot of constraints. They are benchmarked, they have mark-to-market. A good example is that so our government, I'm from the Netherlands, our prime minister last week in Glasgow said, action, action, action. And then when he was asked to sign a pledge to stop investing in fossil fuel, he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I have the mandate to do it." So then he needed to go back to the Netherlands, and then finally, luckily, they signed the pledge yesterday. But it gives you already an idea of how much constraints and how it's so difficult to balance all kinds of interests. But at the same time, you see that people really want to make the change, but you have to give them the tools. And that's why we set up Lend a Hand and NHS Africa+ is for people to be able to be in full control of where their money goes to, so that they know that a certain impact is created. And what I think is interesting for people to understand is that this is really additional to all the institutional money and governmental money that's flowing in. If you look at the risk appetite of socially minded impact investors, they're not optimizing for the best risk return profile. They're really looking into, hey, is this something where I feel that next to a decent financial return, I'm also making boatload of social return, because then the combination of the two can be attractive to me. And for each person, it can be different, right? It can be solar in Africa for one person, and it can be about jobs creation in Indonesia for someone else. But there will always be people willing to do those kind of financing, but you have to provide them the tools. And if we all do that together, so we have the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach, and we also work together and leverage on each other's expertise, then I'm pretty optimistic about the future. I'm actually in Glasgow as we speak. I'm actually at the COP at the conference, and I actually sense that this optimism is here. That we really have to put in a lot of hard work, all together, and especially if we really think hard about how we use our money, then we can actually leave a better planet for our children than we got them.
That was great, Koen. Please be as inspiring as you just were now in Glasgow. As I fully agree that people are being more and more aware of the impact of their actions. But of course, it's not only the way we behave, but also the way we allocate our money and our savings. And you don't need to wait until having large amounts of capital to actually start investing for impact, as crowdfunding has demonstrated or is still demonstrating. And with this reflection, I would like to jump until the last question for Francesca. Also looking at the cases of Oscar and Koen, how do you think crowdfunding as a way to wrap everything up? How do you think this crowdfunding actually can leverage new resources for achieving the SDGs? And why is this important for crowdfunding platforms and also for Eurocrowd, and how you will also tackle this in the upcoming working group on sustainable finance you are working on?
Thank you. This is, I think, a most relevant question, or just a start of a Q&A session that I hope is going to be very interactive, because how crowdfunding can contribute to provide those additional resources we have seen in the cases of Crowdfunding Vizcaya, in the case of Lend a Hand, and we have a number of cases where crowdfunding platforms are actually, for example, integrating SDGs within their own criteria to assess and monitor and evaluate projects that they then onboard. So there is already a high level of attention that the crowdfunding world ecosystem is placing on SDGs. And this is also has gotten a very positive feedback from the backers or investors side, because we're also thinking of, for example, grant-based or non-financial crowdfunding models such as donation and reward. And we have seen that there are many platforms that are engaging with SDGs, so they are keen on measuring and monitoring and assessing impact. What we have noticed is that there is no standard way of approaching this. And so we got this, I think, really early on, and we got the idea of, as we always do, this is our working methodology of gathering every perspective that we could, both within our network of existing members and outside our network of existing members, to try and come up with a working group of different stakeholders that would work exactly on that. So on how many experiences do we have out there that are already engaging with SDGs, and how can we combine them and find a consensus so that all those that are willing can actually refer to a unique framework or a similar framework with similar criteria that could help anyone understand what the impact of crowdfunding as an industry is actually making in terms of contribution to SDGs. So this is the idea. And the relevance of this actually has its roots in the own EU sustainable finance strategy. Because if you think about, for example, the green taxonomy that just came out, of course, it was part of the sustainable finance plan, and it was directed at shifting big flows of capital, because as Koen was saying, the impact that your investment make is actually higher than the behavior that you can have. And so, of course, the Commission has designed this strategy to shift these big flows of capital and also to kind of regulate the behavior of big corporates. Problem is, in the EU, we have 98% of the economy that is composed by startups and small and medium enterprises, which are finding it very, very challenging to fit within this framework. And as you well know, these are the perfect stakeholders and the main target for crowdfunding platforms. So we have small investors and relatively small companies that are all coming together in crowdfunding platforms. And so within this framework, we thought that if we could come up with a sort of a standardized or agreed upon framework on how to map and monitor SDGs through crowdfunding platforms, then we could also make the so-called and well-known policy recommendations that in Brussels are the core activity of every respectable association with sounder evidence to back our requests or our suggestions. And so we have launched this working group. We have received a number of applications that I have to say we're still reviewing because they were more than expected. And we're, of course, open to welcome any type of member. I mean, the more diversity we can have, the better, because the idea is also to combine this new framework with what will be or what is the reference framework for different types of investors. So, for example, impact investment funds or microfinance institutions, so that companies and financial industries that move in different areas can actually all go back to one unique framework. And this could be comparable, and it could be a basis to make it understandable to everyone.
That was a great way to wrap it up and summarize it. So thank you very much, Francesca, for your answer. Now, as we are approaching the last 20 minutes of the session, I would really like to encourage all the audience to post any question in the chat. And also, if you would like to ask directly to the speakers, you can ask for broadcast, and we can give you the rights of the microphone and the camera, and then you can speak directly with them. So please don't be shy and participate in these last minutes of the conversation. We know that in the virtual world sometimes it's a bit more difficult, but you are all of you very encouraged to participate. As I see that we still don't have any question, I would like to start with one. Looking at we talked about the uniqueness of crowdfunding, looking at the supply side of the space. But I would like to ask the three of you, what do you think are the most unique characteristics of crowdfunding for the demand side? So what do the entrepreneurs that are funded through crowdfunding campaigns get from crowdfunding that is quite unique thanks to this type of capital? Francesca, do you want to give it a start since you just talked?
Sure, of course. I'll just hint of things that came to my mind right now, but I think that we have two different areas. We have the advantages that relate to the financial side of crowdfunding. So most times you have different evaluation criteria to be accepted on a crowdfunding platform. So you have different types of validation or due diligence processes that are run. You also have different timeframes between when you are actually onboarded on a crowdfunding campaign and when you're actually receiving the funds that you have raised, which are usually shorter than most traditional funding sources. On the investor side, for example, you have the possibility of diversifying your portfolio that is much higher. And also you have this direct connection and this direct look into the projects that you're really investing in or into the companies. And so, of course, these are all advantages that relate to the specificity of crowdfunding being an internet-based tool as well as a very democratic tool due to the very small tickets that one could invest through. And then you have the range of non-financial advantages in terms of increasing your shareholder network with a range of different expertise areas from your new shareholders, visibility, market validation. You have testing of your idea to your community. You have feedback cycles that are actually much shorter than when you launch a product or a service on the market as it is. And these non-financial advantages that I just mentioned are very interesting for an entrepreneur because they actually happen while they're raising funds. So it's not, you have more or less the same advantages if you run a marketing campaign after you raise the funding. But in the specific case of crowdfunding, you have to think that you're validating while fundraising. And so this shortens the cycle, but also avoids a number of miscalculations, errors, mistakes that could make a difference for a startup or for a small company.
That's great. You actually coupled your answer with we have this other question on what are the best ways crowdfunding platforms leverage the pool of investors to offer non-financial support. So I would like to translate this to Koen and Oscar. How do you operate this non-financial support, and in practice, what Francesca was just mentioning, how do you apply it?
Okay, in our case, I would say that the public administration of Biscay, they have a powerful tools in mentoring area, and we provide a lot of advisors in that sense. So we are a little bit, if you compare it with other platforms that are willing for other kind of investors with smart capital that are trying to help their investment. So in that sense, we are a little bit different, and to provide a lot of knowledge in that part. I would say that for classic investors, we provide the crowdfunding platform provides a lot of visibility of the project, and also I would say something that Koen mentioned before, that provides a lot of knowledge about where the money goes. That's a key point in this part of the chain, because in our case, for example, you have the access to the business plan, and you have the access to where it's going to be invested. So that's really a different point if you compare with other type of social impact investment projects. And I would say that we make the promoters very accessible, make those people in touch with investors, and that's also a different and relevant point, with providing fresh reporting about what's going on in the company. And that makes a very different environment if you compare it with for example, our social impact fund or with other type of social impact classic investors.
Thanks, Oscar.
Maybe I can, on that second question about, what was it? The non-financial support. I'm going to state a very unpopular opinion here. At least for us, we tried that and we failed. And I think it's different perhaps for Oscar, and because the projects are also local. For us, our projects are all over the world, except in Europe. And we had many, well, not many, but we had once in a while someone asking like, hey, what else can I do? I'm a successful entrepreneur, I'm retired, I want to help. And we found actually really hard to fit that in. And we also tried to give non-financial support to our investees. And it was actually quite hard to set that up. And I truly came to the belief that that's a totally different field of expertise. I always tell my colleagues we are the Murdam financiers. We can bring the money, but we actually we don't know how to run a business in the Philippines or how to build a solar panel, right? And that's someone else. And also we don't know how you can actually have people successfully go over there or even online and really coach them or help them in a certain way that they are really helped, rather than thanks for the effort, but no one really got something out of it. So for us, we decided to keep the two separate and say, well, we are there for the financing, but for us the buck stops there, and other people, and hopefully there will be other crowdsourcing platforms that can make it happen, because there is a lot of expertise that we could project to other countries.
Thanks, Dun, for sharing that. It's definitely a different case. So yeah, thank you both for sharing. I have a question here from Alex to Francesca, who he's asking if you know how why the EU created the green taxonomy in parallel to the SDGs, and how the two initiatives can complement each other. Do you have some words on this, Francesca? I think that we lost you, so I don't know if we're going to have Francesca back. I see. Yeah. So maybe we can jump to the next question, and if Francesca can manage to come back, then we will pose her this question. Sorry for the technical problem, but we have here another question asking, how do you think that traditional crowdfunding platforms can learn from impact-oriented ones? So maybe Koen and Oscar, you can also have a reflection on this, since I think it's also an important topic on the relationship between impact crowdfunding platforms and the traditional ones.
Maybe I can start. So two things come to mind. So one is that what we see is that investors, when it comes to crowdfunding, it's also about emotions and about feelings, and you really want to see, okay, so what happens then with my money, and what can the entrepreneur do with it? Also comes down to how do you measure impact of the positive impacts that can be created by the entrepreneur. And that's something that not only impact platforms should do, but I think all platforms can do that. And the impact can be very local, and it can be in very different ways, but it will be there. And I think that most crowd investors want to look further than only the financial side of things. Another one is very practical, at least in our case, is that all the project owners are very far away. And that means that for traditional platforms, and then traditional, I'm thinking more so local entrepreneurs in the need of funding. Usually, when they come to a crowdfunding platform, they take with them a network of friends and family who want to invest in that project, and that makes it a little bit easier for the crowdfunding platform because the project owner is also the marketeer of the project. In our case, we have to do the marketing on behalf of the entrepreneurs. And that makes that, for us, we see it more almost as an e-commerce game, where we really have to be out there and do the convincing game almost for people to really invest in certain entrepreneurs in certain countries. But it also gives us a huge incentive to work on our credibility. So that's one of the reasons that we've decided to get the MiFID license, which is a pretty heavy license for investment firms early on, to make sure that people know that in terms of governance and everything else, we have have it in order, so that the projects that become available are high risk. They're in emerging markets, but at least the whole process is correct in how we have onboarded these entrepreneurs. So more thinking of how can the platform work also for the investors that are not in the network of the project owners is maybe gives you a certain way of thinking that can help in growing your investor base.
Briefly, I will suggest that the market will force them to get into this part of the SDGs. I mean, I think that that people that usually invest in crowdfunding, classic crowdfunding platforms, they will ask for somehow a measure impact, some data about that. I think that it's quite normal that this tendency goes up, and I think it's going to be an unstoppable movement. And they will also ask for sustainable platforms and ask for clear info about what's going on with this. So I think that there is no way to go out of this huge wave that's arriving to us. So I think in the short period of time, most of them will be forced to show data about what's going on with the impact or at least with SDG, and they will have to move to this point. So I'm very positive in this point.
Thank you both, and I hope, Francesca.
Now I think I'm back.
Yes,
I actually never left because I could actually follow through the discussion, but sorry about that.
Not worry. So as you know, we are now looking at the relationship, let's say, between traditional crowdfunding and or business-oriented crowdfunding platforms and also impact-oriented ones. Do you have also any reflection building on what Koen and Oscar just mentioned?
I have to agree with what they have already stated, because of course it is becoming more and more important to understand what are we doing, what are we producing, what are we giving back. I think that the era in which the only element that people would look at was the return on the investment is over, necessarily over, because it's not sustainable anymore. The planet cannot sustain this anymore. Mankind cannot take this anymore, and we need that shift. We need that shift, and we have a tool that we work with every day, which is crowdfunding, that arises from the financial crisis in 2008 to 2012. And so we already have an instrument that is emerging, in contrast to one system that needed some sort of fixing. It emerges as an alternative. And the main, let's say, element that it wants to fix, if you allow me the term, is the fact that finance is too difficult. It's too restricted. It goes to the elite. And crowdfunding wants to reverse this. And here we have the combination between this approach to, let's say, another global issue, which is how to make the investment industry shift towards sustainability and impact, how to orient the investment towards impact. And so crowdfunding, it enjoys that position where the crowd is already behind it. It has already created this connection to individuals. And the power of the crowd power, as we are today saying, is the one that is going to produce in the end the impact. Not alone. Please don't take me wrong. We're not going to solve sustainability issues through crowdfunding, although I am a very strong advocate of it. It needs to be combined. It needs to be developed in synergy with everything else that we have. But it is the way through which we can involve a large amount of individuals, which will then make something different in terms of how they behave, which will then make different requests to their policymakers, because this is, all part of a big system. And so I think that the contribution of crowdfunding is going to be a relevant one, although maybe looking at the volumes, it's not going to be the instrument that will solve your problem, but in terms of impact that it can make, it has a very, very big potential.
This is great. Thank you, Francesca. And as you might have realized, we also had this previous question for you on the EU green taxonomy and how it complements with the SDGs. I don't know if you have some words on this as well.
Yes, I think it was from Alex. Alex, I apologize directly to you. It seemed like I didn't want to answer, but I will try. I don't have an answer, but it was not on purpose. So I think that, if I remember correctly, the question was, why has the EU developed a sort of alternative to something that was already there? And my guess is that we needed in Europe something that was more stringent, something that would resemble not a regulation, not specifically a law, but something that would have a clear and determined timeline and indicators, and a framework that everybody could look at, not only in terms of targets, but also in terms of procedures. And I think that this is the reason why the EU taxonomy was developed, and now we're in the pipelines also of seeing the emergence of a social taxonomy. So this will all go under the sustainable finance strategy. How are these two frameworks interacting? Also here, I have to say I'm not an expert, so there will be someone that will provide a way better answer than I can, but I think that they build on each other. If I look at it, for me, it's as if the EU taxonomy would take some of the SDGs, those that relate more to the Green Deal or climate actions, and kind of decline it in further detail in the operational sense. So this is the way that I personally see it, but of course, I'm not an expert on this.
Thank you, Francesca, for answering also to that question. So yeah, I think the session has come to the end. Thank you all for this very interesting conversation, for these very exciting discussions. I think this is a really great way to finalize not also all the three streams of content of the conference today, but also the project on crowdfunding that we started this year, and that of course we want to continue working on this along with Lend a Hand, with Seed Capital Vizcaya, and also of course with Eurocrowd in the future. So please stay tuned if this is a topic that is of your interest for all the participants, as we will for sure continue collaborating on this with our members and others. Thank you for the participants as well for joining and being here until the end. And I hope we'll see you in the Collab Award now in the plenary room in a couple of minutes. So again, thank you everyone, and have a good day. Bye bye.